Hey everybody, it's John Bauer. We got another edition of Around the Bonfire, and I am here with the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Jason Fort. Jason, how are you this morning?
Man, I'm great and so fired up to be here with you.
Well, let's go, man. Look, right out of the gate, I'm going to start with a hard-hitting question. I know you've been in the business for 28 years, and there's some rumors about you that are on the street. You weren't always a big deal. Now you are, which is great. But the rumor on the street is that your hairstylist travels with you. Is this true? Can you back this up? Is this a true statement?
That is not a true statement, but I will tell you every Friday afternoon at 2:30, I have a standing haircut appointment, and Amber takes care of me and been doing my hair for a long time. If like over here, you get in your 50s, you get a lot of gray hair. So if I get my zero type fade, you can't see my gray hair, so it keeps me feeling young
All right, so that's what I did here. That was what it was. It was just the consistency,
every
and you look
week.
good, man.
I don't miss it.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
even with the travel, you don't miss it. You're always back then.
Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes I have to mess around and maybe we go to Saturday, but I've been getting my hair cut with her so long, I can text her and I know in advance when we're going to do it. But for the most part, I do travel a lot, probably 3 out of 4 weeks. Um, but Mondays and Fridays, I try to be home.
Mm,
Tuesdays through Thursdays usually is when I'm on the road. Sometimes it changes, like this week it was Monday through Thursday, but I want to be home on Friday. Family's hugely important to me. My wife owns her own business. We have two
hmm.
amazing girls. One that's in at A&M and couldn't make dad more proud. And she just ordered her Aggie ring and gets it actually on my birthday on April 4th. So super fired up about that. And then our youngest daughter's in sixth grade. So I just want to be around. Family's one of the most important parts of my life. And I do travel a lot. I do burn up the road, but if I can be the home that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and be consistent, it's better for the family dynamic.
Yeah, no, that's huge. So you kind of started touching on it, but it's your professional career is with Asset. I mean, all the way back to Asset Campus, right? Now Asset Living, but is it all Asset?
Yeah, it's not. It's actually a funny story. I started my student housing journey August of 1993, sophomore year of college. One of my great friends, John Bishop, offered me a job as a resident advisor. I had no
Hmm.
idea what I wanted to do in life. I had just went through my freshman year. I was pretty good at baseball when I was in high school and wanted to go play it in college. Had a couple of opportunities, went for a tryout, made it, you know, and I was going to go to East Texas Baptist in
Hmm.
Commerce, Texas. Well, I went and toured, just my gut feeling didn't feel it. Decided, hey, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to College Station. Going to go to junior college, get my grades up, and then transfer into A&M. So made that decision. Got a phone call from John Bishop, offered me the job,
Hmm.
and look at it now. That was August of '93, and now 32 years later, I'm still in student housing. And the funny thing, my wife and I just built a house and moved in, and two houses down is John Bishop and his family. They live there. We've been friends. Now we've got a back gate that I can walk straight to John's house, and he can come to mine. And we've been friends ever since then. And anytime I tell my story, I mention him. He's a huge influence on my life. One of my best friends, one of my mentors. He has an amazing story. He worked for the Durham Bulls. He worked
Hmm.
for the Daytona 500. He worked for the NBA, and now he works for a company called Playfly Sports that do NIL. So I live
Yeah.
vicariously through him. I'm a huge sports guy, and he's had like four of the coolest jobs that I think anybody that loves sports wants to be in. And so it's a funny story how I got in. And 32 years ago, I had no idea really what student housing was, and I
Hmm.
now it's my life, it's my career, it's how I provide for everything. And it took me until my mid 30s before I realized this was my career and I was good at it.
Mm.
But it's a fun story. So to answer your question, a long-winded way to answer your question, I started with Asset 21 years ago. So before that, I was with a small company that did private dormitories and did that for about 11 years. I then went and worked for Fairfield Residential, and one of my mentors in life, Wanda Norick, hired me there. And I was only there 3 months because Asset came knocking, and another one of my mentors, Jeff Arnold, gave me a
Mm.
chance and an opportunity to run a private dormitory in College Station called the Cambridge, which Asset Living
Yeah.
still runs today. I started, we had 4 student housing properties. We were super small, but dormitories is what I knew. I was like, this is right down my alley. And 21 years later, I'm still with the company.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the Cambridge might have been the first asset, it had to have been the first one that I sold
That's when
when
you and
we
I
were,
started doing business together for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
back when it was Erio, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe you can comment on just the evolution of student housing because I'm just a little bit younger than you, and I lived in a house. I was at Baylor, and that house has been razed to the ground. I mean, sewage underneath the house for 6 months in the Waco sun. I mean, so when I look at these things now, I'm like, these are gaudy monstrosities. These are like, I'm like, Casey, maybe we should move in to like a student housing group around here because they have changed dramatically from your start than like back when it was Asset Campus to now. So maybe talk a little about just the factors of what has caused that to change over the years from what you can see.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even when I was in school, it was private dormitories. You'd live
Hmm.
there or you'd live on campus, and then you'd move into an apartment or a house or something like that. And that was kind of the wave. And then, about 15 years ago, the by the bed student housing started popping up where you'd see 4 bedroom, 2 bath, and people
Right.
are all about it. And they were building them all throughout the nation. And then it started getting more sophisticated, and you started to have more bed bath parity. Location became huge where you'd have these huge high rises or mid rises and stuff like that. And now fast forward to 2025, you go into college town and every corner you turn there's a place
Hmm.
for students to live, and it's it's almost over the top now with the amenities that they have, with the services that they have. I mean, we deal with 18 to 22-year olds every day that are living in these facilities and their mom and dad or their guarantors. And it's very high touch. Customer service
Hmm.
is huge. They're very high maintenance. It takes a lot to deal with them.
Hmm.
But if you treat them right, that customer service, resident experience, they're going to renew. They're going to stay with you 2, 3, 4 years. And that's the key to success. And these student housing facilities are amazing. I
Yeah.
walk into them and I'm just blown away. And I've been through so many through my career. I'm almost like a student housing snob right now, where I walk in somewhere and I'm like, yeah, that's impressive, but I've seen 14 other things that look just like that. And what these developers are doing are amazing, but you go back and you focus on what's going on, and it's all about the people that are on site. It's all about the customer service. It's all about the resident experience, because everybody has a gym, everybody has a study lab, everybody has a resort style pool. And these kids and these parents really want to be pampered. They want customer service to be key. And that's why they keep coming back. And since COVID, the industry in general, in my opinion, got very complacent, got very lazy, because not as many beds were being built. Enrollment was going up, occupancies were shooting through the roof, rental rates were going 8 to 15%, and people were just coming, and you didn't have to do a lot. Student housing's got a lot more competitive nowadays, and you really have to
Hmm.
work for the occupancies. We're still seeing 5 to 8% rent growth, which if you're investing in that, you're about that all day. But the
Yep.
occupancies have started to struggle. Enrollments at some universities, tier 2, tier 3, have gone down. The power fours are still surging. So, when you look at student housing, probably not a safer investment in this world right now than student housing. We have about 225 properties throughout the course of the US in 42 states, 115,000 beds. We've been doing this for 20 years, been number one in the student housing business, top operator for 14 years straight. So the
Hmm.
evolution's been crazy, but it's over the top. I mean, my daughter lives at one of the properties that we manage, and luckily for my bank account, it's very modest. It's not one of these high rises that's $1,500 a month. But her unit's big, and she loved it, and she's lived there for 3 years, and they treat her right. They have a great unit. She has great roommates, and is going to leave with a college story and college friends that really defines what student housing is all
Yeah.
about, right? Making the best friends of your life, making great memories, learning and growing, and then you go off, you graduate, you start your career, maybe you get married, maybe you have kids, maybe you don't, and kind of go that route.
Yeah. I have an affinity for student housing. And I mean, part of that when we were Erio, I mean, was we were launching the company, it was the Great Recession, 2006, 7, and 8. And student housing was recession resilient. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it makes me think, we were at Interface in North Carolina in December, whenever it was, and you're up on the panel and you said it still has the strong fundamentals. So talk about what those fundamentals are. You've talked a little bit about what asset does with it, with the, high touch, the, customer experience. So talk about those fundamentals and then kind of look back on the COVID and talk about the complacency. So what are
sure.
those fundamentals? You said this is why it's a good investment. This is why rents are growing. And then talk about what was lacking during that kind of post-COVID,
Sure.
if it was during COVID or just right after, what was the complacency about?
Yeah, so I'll answer your second question first. So during COVID, or right after, during that time, we were like, oh my gosh, people aren't going to pay rent. People are going to leave. People are going to come home. They're never going to go back. These universities, what are we going to do? And
Mm,
we realized after about a month, these students didn't want to live at home anymore. They already had their freedom. They're like, get me back to college town X, Y, and Z. I want to live my college experience. Rents shot back up, collections and everything like that. And by that August, for the most part, we were back to normal. We had new policies and procedures on a bunch of things, but student housing, colleges are recession proof. And it
yeah.
doesn't matter what we're going on in our economy, if it's the Democrats, if it's the Republicans, student housing is going to be there. And when you look at your Power Four conferences, enrollments are really going up, and
Which
new
is shocking.
constructions are going down. So we keep going up. So students need a place to live, but we don't have as many beds. So occupancies are strong, rental rates are strong. So the fundamentals are really there. In your tier two or tier three markets, some are super successful, some are average, and some are struggling, and they might combine with other universities to go from there. But I would say the majority of the student housing world really focuses on these Power Four conferences. Used to be
Hmm.
Power Five, whatever you want to say. We're talking universities that have over 15,000 students, or you go
Right.
up to 100,000 students when you look at, a Arizona State or a, UCF when you throw in the junior colleges and everything like that. So the
Hmm.
fundamentals investment wise are there. When we talk COVID and we talk, kind of easy and kind of set back and just kind of wait for people to come to them, people
Hmm.
didn't have a lot of choices. And these digital marketing companies kick butt, and they did a great
Yeah.
job driving people through the door, but people forgot about outreach. People forgot about follow-ups. People forgot about true grassroots marketing, to going out there and pulling the students together with your clubs, your sororities and fraternities. And we see a lot of, behind the desk managers. And I don't want behind the desk managers. I want managers that are out interacting with the teams, interacting with the parents, with the students, out interacting and marketing and doing everything like that. But you got a lot of people who are like, hey, we're going to fill up. We're going to get
Yeah.
6% rent growth and my owners are happy. So I don't really have to do that. And now, especially this year and some last year, you see these markets that are 10 or 15% behind, and you go in and you audit what they're doing, and you're like, well, you have 100 people that hadn't been followed up on. Your traffic counts are down from last year. You better get the fundamentals down and start executing each and every day to be successful, because they're just not going to roll through the door if you
Yeah.
everybody's competing for the same amount of students. So student housing is not brain surgery. If you execute outreach marketing, you execute customer service, resident experience, follow-ups, maintenance, you're going to be successful. I mean, if you have a good team, regardless of the market, you're not going to fail, because good teams don't fail. They just don't. Bad teams fail in bad markets. Bad teams sometimes fail in good markets because they're
Good
not
markets.
looking at the basics.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the great and powerful Joe Goodwin, but I remember back in the day, he's like, look, it's really simple. It's about getting heads in beds. And then while you're there, that customer experience, that taking care of the maintenance, just doing the blocking and tackling. Like if you do that well, you're going to happen. Which, by the way, it's probably a great time to let you all know that this is sponsored by Bonfire, which we're great at outreach. We're great at follow-ups. We're great at maintenance notifications and all that. So just so you know. So transition a little bit, Jason, you said a couple interesting things, in the green room. And then just a moment ago, you said in your mid 30s, you're like, huh, this is my career. What was that like? You just woke up one day and you're like, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, you've been doing it by that point, what, for 10, 20, 15 years, mid 30s, somewhere in there. What was that like when you woke up and you're like, this is my career. This is what I'm doing. What was that like?
I, the the moment that the kind of light bulb went off was I had somebody that had worked for me at the Cambridge and College Station, started when he was 19, and he was a CA and then became a leasing manager and a general manager, and he got promoted to be a regional manager. And I looked myself in the face and went, or I looked myself in the mirror and went, man, I can truly affect people that work for me, and I can provide a career for them. Like,
Mm,
and then you start looking down the road and you see those same people are getting married and they're having kids, and you're like, man, I can help people succeed and I can help people find a career. There's so many people, some that I mentioned that are my mentors, that got me to where I was. And when I was 35, I was like, this is real life. This is my job. This is what I'm good at. This is what I excel at. And I don't think I ever realized it until people under me started
yeah.
getting promoted. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm making a difference. Like,
Yeah.
and I see what all my other buddies and friends are doing for a career. And I'm like, I'm good at this. And I don't know that I knew I was good at that until I saw the people around me flourish. And then I was like, man, I can make a difference. And everybody that I deal with each and every day. And at that point, I'm like, I'm all in. And my career, it was going well, but I think my career went to another level because I knew this is it. This is what you're going to do until you retire. And
Mm,
I make the joke all the time. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I would do without student housing, because it's what I'm good at.
yeah.
And what I know and what drives me to get out of bed every morning, because I'm like, man, I want to go tell this next client, prospective client, about student housing and why they should buy in Oxford, Mississippi or Columbia, Missouri. And, I want to go out and train the next 21-year-old star that's a GM. I want them to understand that
Mm,
they can do this. And when I was in college, there was no student housing management. That was not a career. And now people can make it a career, and they can make good money doing it because good
mm,
people are hard to find. if they dominate what they do in each and every day. I gave a presentation this week to our company and I talked about client relations and career. Like I was like, my one piece of advice, if you dominate what you do every day, you're automatically going to get promoted because everyone around you is going to see what you do every day and see what the value
Mm,
is. It doesn't matter if you're a CA or a senior vice president. If you dominate what you do every day, you're going to keep climbing up the corporate ladder. And
mm,
that to me is what is so fun about what I do. And I get to
yeah.
work with young people every day in student housing. Like, give me the Kool-Aid. I'm all about drinking it. It is a fun environment to be around. And I get to learn about cool stuff that I have no idea about. Like I learned about Instagram from people that work for me. I learned about
Yeah.
Snapchat from people that work from like I learned about TikTok or anything like I wouldn't have known. I don't care
Mm,
in the grand scheme of things. But when they tell me about it and I can see what it's doing, it's amazing. Like
mm,
they make me better at what I do because they keep me up to date with what's going on.
mm. So it sounds like it's what I'm hearing from you is just a lot of satisfaction and specifically on the impact. And you brought up, that's in the mid 30s, your boots on the ground, right? You're really the hands and feet helping out on the operational side, seeing those people get promoted. But then was it 5 years ago you made that transition from the operational side to the sales side? So who initiated that? Was that you? Tell me about how that started and how long ago that was.
Yeah, I spent my whole career until 4 years ago, and I was an operator. And if
Hmm.
people ask me now, I hate saying I'm a salesman. I am a salesman. That's what I do.
Hmm.
But I'm an operator by heart. That's what I do. Um, and 4 years ago, our CEO, Ryan McGrath, came to me and was like, hey, I really think for our student department to flourish, I want you to go lead our sales division. I said, Ryan, I don't really know much about sales, but you know what? You think it's best for the company, I'm all in. And let's do it. Let's jump in. And at that point, one of my best friends in the world and one of my colleagues, Stacy Lukoki, took over our
Yeah.
operations, and I went to sales. And I tell you what, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me because I found a new area to really affect the business. And Stacy is an amazing leader, an amazing operator, and I can work hand in hand with her to bring new business in, to work with our clients and really affect the business. And it was awesome. I'll tell you
Mm,
this, I'll preface the first year of being a salesperson, of leading our division, I was not good at what I did. I was
mm,
awful to be when I look and self-evaluate what I did. Like at the
mhm.
time, I thought, okay, I'm doing what I need to do. But year two, year three, year four, I was like, man, I don't even understand why they're giving me a paycheck because I'm not really affecting the way I wanted to and the way I
Mm.
envisioned. And
Are
there
you talking about
wasn't a
like from like
manual.
are you talking about from like closing or bringing in new clients
I
or?
just think everything, I didn't have, there was no training manual. There was no, hey, this is what you want to do. It was just like, Jason, go out and do your thing. And I didn't know what my thing was at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that was my biggest thing. Like I'm a big why person. I'm a big motivation person. And I thought I knew what my why was at the time, but I really didn't. And
Mm,
I had to change and I had to transform and I had to work on, okay, what's my space? Where's my brand with asset living and what am I doing to truly affect the business? And I was talking to a bunch of people, but there was my why wasn't behind it because I didn't know what it was. And I had an executive coach at the time,
mm.
and that Ryan set up for me. And I tell you what, life changing experience. And it started out when
Really?
I was in operations, and Michael Burcham is one of the reasons I am who I am today. I'm a better leader because of him. I'm a better husband because of him. I'm a better father. I'm a better friend. he really taught me about blind spots.
Mm,
And when I say blind spots, for the people who don't know, it's really what you're not good at.
mm,
And it's you think you're good at, but in your blind spot, you're not really good at all. So once I self-reflected on those blind spots, I really focus on getting better at that. Like listening was one of my blind spots. And once I became an active listener with my
mm.
clients, with my wife, with my girls, with my friends, it changes communication, it changes life, it changes interactions. And Michael really helped me figure out, I have probably 10 blind spots that we identified that I needed to work on. I remember leaving my first meeting with him, and I get back to the airport in Nashville, and I'm like, man, I suck at life. I'm not good at life. And, I was just kind of self reflecting because when somebody opens your eyes on stuff you need to get better at, it's liberating. But I tell you what, I woke up after I had a pity party for myself in the airport and my drive home once I got back to Texas. The next morning, I woke up rejuvenated. And
Mm.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to dominate these 10 things, and they're not going to be my blind spots anymore. And I'm going to get better at it. And we worked and we put a plan together and goals and, figuring out what my why was and how I was going to affect. And I look at myself today and I feel good about where I am. I feel good about what I provide for my company. I feel good about what I provide the student housing space. I know how to do my job so much better now than I did then. It's an elevation of life, right? Like when I was 10 years old, I wasn't good at X, Y, and Z, and you learn and you get better at it. It's no different than when you're 50 and you're trying to really change your life and change the way that you do things. And I think really self-reflection and every day trying to get better and really make a difference was something that really got me to the next level.
Mm. Yeah, so many things we could go and jive off of what you just shared. The active listening is something that I've taken to a lot, just even in the sales process, hearing the needs. And I would shout out Chris Voss. He was like a CIA or FBI negotiator. He has a book called Never
Yeah.
Split the Difference. Talks about tactical empathy and like what you can do to actually enter into that person's world and get out of your own perception of them, of their needs, of the situation, and then get their perspective on things. And it's fascinating because we had you and I spoke right before this, and just not that we talked about politics, but it's like, man, the world could use a hell of a lot more of that, where you actually cut through the pomp and circumstance of whatever it is you're doing and actually see the person, hear the person. Oh, and by the way, we can do business and make change for their financial situation, for the students on the ground, for the parents, for the company. And it does go a long way. And so that's pretty fascinating, even though it was a blind spot for you. I think, not, yeah, I like to think my blind spots are so blatantly obvious. They're just hard to work on. So I've got my own to work on. But tell me this, Jason, as you're sharing, um, you talked about how did you stay motivated during that transition time? I mean, if you're getting your haircut every week at 2:30, the discipline side, I think is going to be more natural to a man like yourself than me. I kind of like to fly by my seat of my pants from time to time, but how did you stay motivated when you're getting coached and you're going, oh crap, I've got not one blind spot, but 10. Oh crap, I'm not that good at this. I knew this world like the back of my hand. I could walk into a shop, see what was going on, and just pick it apart and lead them in the right direction. So, how did you stay motivated during that transition time? That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. So the motivation came from trying to be better every day. And then I started talking about my discipline. Like I'm a very disciplined person. My alarm clock goes off at 4:31 every day or 4:32 every day, depending on what time zone I'm in. I keep it the same. I get up, I work out, I do my thing. If I'm at home, I go back, get my youngest ready for school, take her to school, spend time with her. If I'm on the road, my day starts a little earlier because the dad part is out of it. But I learned when I got to my business development role, I really need to understand what's going on in the news, in the real estate news. So I'd spend my first hour of the day just scouring articles. And I have, I don't know, about 40 Google keywords alerts. So at 3 a.m., I get 50 emails of, articles. So the first hour I just spin through, okay, I'm going to find out about the world. If it's BTR, if it's a multifamily, if it's student, I want to know what's going on. And during that time, I'll make sure I put the stuff that I find interesting out on LinkedIn. And that was one of the biggest things. Before I was in business development, LinkedIn was a cool place that I go look at every now and then. But I knew business development wise, I needed to build a brand. I needed to build an identity. I wanted people to look at me at like, that guy understands student housing. He's an expert. He gets it. And I really focused on making sure my LinkedIn brand was on point. So I start my day doing that. I then go into, whatever my focus is on that day. If it's following up with clients, if it's doing budgets, if it's exploring markets, and then I would go through that. And then I would finish the second part of my day was all about client relations and touching base with clients and interacting and stuff like that. And then I'd end the day researching again to see if there was anything I missed from the beginning of the day that I wanted to look back into. And I also learned at the very beginning, I would overextend myself. And I'd have call after call after call, and I didn't have time to do stuff that I needed to do to be good as a salesperson. So once I figured out how to manage my schedule, I got better at what I do, because I think a lot of times people overextend themselves and call every 30 minutes, and then you don't have time to reflect on the past call. You don't have time to return a call. You don't have time to return an email. You don't have time to do this kind of LinkedIn stuff or this kind of message, or, if you do personal stuff, return a call to my wife or do this or do that. So I think once I learned really how to manage my schedule, because on the operations side, it was different. I was on the phone with ownership groups or clients or anything like that. And now I got to be the one that's going out. Like I used to get 1,000 emails a day in operations, and now my inbox is totally different. I'm like, I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do. I'm lost. So learning how to manage the schedule, and really, I'll keep you into this term, but I want to dictate my day and not have somebody else dictate my day. And when I'm in control of my day, I'm a better executive. When I'm not in control of my day, stuff starts changing and stuff starts going wrong, and the to-do list starts piling up. So I think once I figured those things out, I got better at what I was doing.
Yeah, I was actually talking to McGrath recently, and he said, you better tell your story or someone else is going to tell it for you, which sounds like I want to dictate what happens today as much as I can, because you can't control 90% of the stuff that happens in life. But if you can own that. So when you're talking about, determining what you're going to do in the day, it sounds like you went from like a very operational, like by the book, good fundamentals, do the basics, to the wild, wild west of the sales world. And so tell me, because you said this earlier, you had a why on the operational side and then lost that. So in the meantime, you're learning, you're becoming, for lack of a better term, an influencer through the knowledge that you're gaining. You're dictating what's happening to your schedule more so than letting it happen to you. But what was the shift in the why for you, if you don't mind, if it's not too personal? What was the why before? What was the why after? And what made that jump for you? How did that evolve?
Sure. I think career wise, my biggest why was I now have to be the leader in understanding what's going on in every student housing market. If somebody talks to me, I can tell them this is the market to pursue, this is the market not to pursue. What I learned my first year, what I was probably most scared of going into my sales role, was an owner's going to ask me a question, I'm not going to have the answer.
Hmm.
Well, what I learned was I know every answer that they have, plus I'm going to tell them questions that they should have asked me because I know how to operate a property. What I didn't know was what's going on in Kalamazoo or what's going on in Oxford, Ohio. And what I focused on was I'm going to know every market better than our operations team, better than our ownership groups, better than our prospective clients. So when somebody calls me, I'll have the information. And that took, I had been to a lot of these markets, through my operations days, but now I have clients that rely on me that say, I am not going to buy a student housing facility unless Jason tells me to. And that feels really good. Like being able to know that I have trust of our clients, current clients, prospective clients, and it's like, hey, he's an expert on this. If he's not about it, I'm not about it. And when I started thinking like an owner even more, and I did that on the operations side, but
Yeah,
now
I
I
mean,
had
you
to
had
think
to.
about it as an investment. Like, would I take me and my wife's life savings and put it into a property in Gainesville, Florida?
Hmm.
And once I started thinking that way and started saying that to our clients, they're like, oh man, he gets this. He understands it. He's got operations, he's got the markets. Now he understands the investment side that a lot of my owners, it's their livelihood. If they make a bad
Yeah.
decision, they're out of the business. And I started thinking like it was my money, and it really took me to another level. And then on the personal side, I really took 5 things that I really focused on in life. And I'm a big faith guy, so faith is number one. I told you earlier, I'm a big family guy, and family is number two. The next thing is I truly have a desire to make a difference in somebody's life. If that's somebody I meet at the gym in the morning, somebody I meet at Starbucks, one of our workers that I get to interact with, if it's you, if it's prospective client X, Y, and Z, like I want to do something that helps their life. And that
Hmm.
like that's a true desire to me. The next one is I never want to let any of my team down. Like I always want to be there for them, right? And the last one is I truly want to be good at whatever I do. And I think that's the thing when I switched to the business development that I didn't really have. And that was the final piece that I understood. Okay, I have to strive to be the best at it. Are there other business development people that are better than me? Sure. But I'm going to strive every day to get better and better and better by learning, by reading, by talking to people, by interacting with our current operations team, with other operations team, and finding people to learn from. And then I'm going to share what I know in life with people so that can help them. And I think that mindset really helped me go into a role that I was unsure of. And as I
Hmm.
sit here today, I'm like, bring it on. Let's get more. Like I had the most. We brought in the most beds that we ever have. We increased business by 84% last year,
Are
which
you serious?
which in a time where there wasn't a lot of acquisitions going
Movement.
on,
Yeah.
asset living with the help of Stacy Lakoki, who's my partner in crime, we just killed it and saw true growth in the division. And 2025 is it's going the same way. And I think if acquisitions keep going better, like Q3, Q4, we actually start seeing some transactions, it's only going to help. Um, but those things are really my focus in life and what gets me out of bed. I mean, I work for an amazing company that I wholeheartedly believe in, and I work with some amazing people. Like you mentioned, Joe Goodwin. That guy, we've been friends for 21 years. We worked
Hmm.
together at the Cambridge. He's one of my best friends in this world and have learned so much stuff from him. But I get to work alongside of him every day. How
Hmm.
fun is it get to work with your best friends? I mean, and people like Alex Abernathy, who's worked for me forever, he doesn't anymore. He leads our whole marketing on our multifamily side, but I've got to learn from him for the past decade. Like that kind of stuff's amazing. And that kind of stuff's motivating and just gets me out of bed any morning. I'm like, let's do this. Let's take it on. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. What's interesting is I hear you talk as you kind of listed off, faith, family. Um, what was the next one? Faith, family.
The desire to make a difference.
Oh, that's it. That
Yeah.
one. That coupled with the last one you got being the best, what I'm hearing is like in that transition period, I heard this once, was like you have to have a vision of like heaven and then have a vision of hell. So it's like almost like you have like the hope side and then the fear side. So in your own desire to make an impact on the person at Starbucks or thinking like an owner, like this is their life savings, they're putting it, they're trusting me. So there's like almost a little bit like a healthy dose of fear that drove you. And I don't mean you were scared and anxious. I just mean like you're like, oh crap, this is a big deal. And I think that's one of the things I loved about student housing is that you are like when I mean we're doing great bonfire as a company in student housing still, but like the fact that like these buildings and these teams are entrusted with someone's most precious investment, like your daughter. Like you're
Yeah.
not just going to send them off to some, crap hole where they don't do it. So that like impact is huge in student housing. And so I don't know if that kind of you relate to that as far as your like enjoyment of student housing, but curious on I mean, no one likes to admit they're afraid of something, but how much of that did I hit the nail on the head at all? It's like fear of like, man, I want to make an impact. I want to be an expert. I want to be the best. And if I don't know those things, then I can't
Yeah.
produce, I can't provide. So I don't know if that kind of
Yeah.
fear, if there's anything you can articulate about that.
Fear of failure is a true thing, right? Like I get up every day and I know I'm going to make mistakes because I'm a human and that's just life. But I am not going to fail. Like I'm not going to let my team down. I'm not going to let my family down. I'm not going to let my friends down. And I'm going to learn from every failure that I have. But it absolutely is a driving force. I mean, I told you year one of business development, I wasn't good at what I did. And,
Mm.
looking back at that and self
Hold on, real
evaluating,
quick, Jason,
yeah.
what age were you at when that initial year was?
Yeah, I mean, I was 45, 46. I mean, so I had a good career, but I was doing something that was new. I was uncomfortable. There was not a training manual. Kind of like the first time I became a father, like there's no training manual. And like the way I am as a father for my 11-year-old was different than the father I was for my 21-year-old. Like that 10-year gap, I became a better dad during that time because I understood what being a dad was all about. Well, the first time you're a dad, you don't know what you're doing. And you
Mm.
think you do, but there's a lot of failures in there that you learn from. And it's no different about being a husband and no different about being an executive or being in operations or business development. Like, I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to get out of bed every morning and brush my teeth and look in the mirror and go, I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at being a dad, or I'm not good at being a husband. So that fear of failure really drives success. And,
Mm.
if you're not learning, you're not going to get better at it. Like I started probably about 5 years ago when I work out in the morning, I'd always listen to music and I was getting in kind of a rut, working out. I was like, I got to change something up. So I started listening to podcasts or audiobooks or stuff like that. Like, okay, I'm going to learn while I work out. Like, because music wasn't doing anything for me. And some people, music motivates them. It doesn't for me. I need to listen to you on a podcast, or I need to listen to whoever it is on a podcast talking about a subject so I can learn more about it, so I can get better at it. My workouts changed immediately because I
Mm.
was learning about what was going on. I was this morning actually, I was listening to a pastor out of North Carolina, Stephen Furtick, who does elevation worship. His message today was amazing. And I had an amazing workout. Like it happens because of what you put into your head, right? Like I am who I am today because of what has gone in my ears, in my head, what I see. And I try to influence that with every person that I deal with. Like, I want to be a positive influence on whoever I deal with every day.
Mm,
I don't want to be a negative cloud of emotion, or I don't want to bitch and complain or gossip, like, because those people around me view it as a black cloud, right? Like, I want to be a ray of sunshine, so to speak, of positivity.
yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of, I would to encourage you, I would say that that's true because if you think, hey, this is Jason Fort, and a partner of mine at Bonfire, we talked about LinkedIn lunatics, and like I've not interviewed any LinkedIn lunatics thus far in here, so I want to encourage you that you are what you just described, and then what you've, I don't really have any I have some desire to be like an influencer, or whatever else, but like your content and like you are an expert. So I'm curious to encourage, and this is to encourage you. I'm getting there, I swear. Like when you think about Jason Ford, he's this expert. He's a titan in the industry for all these years. Works for the New York Yankees, even though you're maybe the Houston Astros in the student housing industry. Go Astros! There's George Springer
That's
over
right. I
there.
like it.
Um, but I would say that you are approachable. You've like actively tried to help me as I've come back into the space. Bauer, you need to know this, this, and this. And so I'm curious what advice you would give to other vendors that are trying to sell. Like you have seen everything. You've seen new and old and bad and good. You've seen everything in between. So I'm wondering what perspective you would share to vendors that might watch this and say, "Hey, uh, here's what you need to know when you're trying to come at asset, when you're trying to sell, when you're
Yeah.
trying to make it. Maybe not necessarily asset in general, but maybe your just own personal take on how vendors are to be and how they're to think. Um, and you've already probably articulated a lot of it. How are they to think and feel and be and operate as they're trying to sell? Because at the end of the day, most humans want to see some success. They want to have some satisfaction. They want to win, and it's hard. You know what I mean? COVID was tough. The world changed upside down, so it changed the game a bit. So just curious, after your 28 plus years in the space, what would you say to the vendors out there? What are you looking for? What do you like? What do you not like when it comes to partners?
Yeah. First of all, for any vendor out there that sends me a LinkedIn message, I am not the decision maker. I cannot make a decision and sign you up tomorrow. I can
Yeah.
certainly open the door and put you down the right direction, which I certainly will. And I will, vendors that I respect and deal with, like yourself, I'll open the doors whenever I can. We have SVP conferences that I was telling you about, and where I just attended our second one with one of our SVPs, Scott Orphan, who did an amazing job at his conference. Tony Buffka's conference and did an amazing job there too. But we have vendors that support us, and every one of those vendors, I would say I have a really good relationship with, because I understand what they're going through on the ops side, trying to get more business. But I also
Mhm.
understand how many emails I send to people, or text or LinkedIn messages that go unresponded to, and how frustrating that is for me. So a vendor, the first thing I ask them is, what is your true message that you're trying to get out?
Mm.
Okay, I hear your message. That's great. Have you asked anyone at this conference or anyone that works for me what their pain points are with whatever you're doing? If it's trash, if it's furniture, if it's digital, if it's whatever, have you specifically asked that general manager or regional RVP what their pain points are? And they're kind of always turn their head like a dog looks at you. And I'm like, you have to understand what is not going right for them. If you're going to sell
Mhm.
to them, you have to fill a void that they're going through.
Mhm.
I'll introduce you to all the people, but there's so many vendors out there, and now get convoluted, right? Like, you don't know who's good, you don't know who's bad, you don't know whose company is a startup, you don't know people's track record. It's really just starting the communication with the GM, with the regional, and figuring out what's going wrong and how you can make it right.
Yeah. Again, I want to, for your next podcast, you should look up this. It's Chris Voss. I always want to call him Timothy Voss. Chris Voss, never split the difference, because that's what I at least try to do, is like get to that pain point, that emotional salience where they're like actually almost like cursing because they're so mad at whatever it is that's going
Yeah,
down. And it's hard. I mean, back in the day, I was thinking about it like my first run with Erio. I'm like, holy cow, I was like had a landline that I was dialing, you know what
yeah,
I mean? And it's hard to do that. And you'll, as a vendor, you're like, I don't know where it's going to go if they have the Zoom call and it's blank. I'm like, you don't
yeah,
like to read the room. But yeah, that is huge because it's what you said earlier: active listening, um, trying to be personal, trying to figure out that pain point, and then communicate. Again, shout out Ryan McGrath.
yeah. If it's
If
a
you're not
true
telling your story, yeah,
partnership with the
yeah,
vendor, a vendor and the operator, and it's a partnership, and we're solving something together, and they're supporting us, we're supporting them. It's best for both worlds, right?
hmm,
A lot of times these vendors aren't practicing what they preach and they don't execute like they say they're going to.
yeah,
Like that's what makes it hard. And like in your world, I mean, you're competing against 20 different companies that say they do the same thing as you do, but do they execute like you do? Like that's the
hmm,
key.
hmm,
That's the hard
yeah,
part.
yeah. That's good. Well, man, give me one last thing as we're going, as I'll sign you off here. But just curious, if you had like, hey, man, this is what I'm really thinking on these days. Just give them something you can leave them with. A book that you've been reading, a podcast you've been enjoying. You mentioned Stephen out there in North Carolina, but anything that
Yeah.
just make it kind of more about either the motivation, the discipline side, or maybe something that you've been tapping into just to learn more on the student housing side. But what would you give the people to walk away with today? Some
Yeah,
tangible,
man.
practical.
That's a deep question to end on. But I think the biggest things, and I'll go back to a couple of the things that I talked about, is really self-reflection,
Hmm,
trying to figure out what my blind spots are and how I can get better at them. The second thing is like whatever team you work for, if you're a property manager or you're a regional or you're a vendor, like if people don't understand what your why is and what your purpose is, they're not going to follow you. And really having a vision of leadership is certainly key to be successful. And then articulating that vision and executing that vision is so important. And the
hmm,
last thing I'll say is just being locked in and focused on what you're doing. You know, I'm not happy every day. I'm not cheery every day. I struggle just like anybody else does, but I'm not going to let anybody know that. Like I'm going to focus and I'm going to do what I can to dominate the day that's ahead of me because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's why Asset has me here. That's why Ryan trusts me. That's why Stacy trusts me. Like I'm going to
hmm,
dominate what I do regardless of what the external obstacles are. I'm just going to do it because that's what my job is. And and I'll say one more, and we talked about this earlier, like making a difference in somebody's life is the most rewarding thing ever. I was at a conference last week, and one of the presenters up there is an RVP in our company. And I can remember the day he was a freshman in college, and I walked up to him and I shoved an application in front of his face and I said, I expect you to fill this application out and I expect it to be on my desk tomorrow morning because I want you to work for me next year. Probably broke all kind of HR policies. Um, but that young man spent the whole night, did the application, put it in front of me. I hired him a month later. He's rose up the asset corporate ladder. He's been here 17 years. He has two beautiful girls. He has an amazing wife. Like there's nothing more motivating than making a difference. And he told me we're riding back to the airport yesterday, and he said, "I can't thank you enough for everything that did for me in life. And I said,
Mm,
stop right there. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me in my life, because that kind of stuff fuels motivation. That kind of stuff fuels desire that I can make a difference. But he's taught me so much in life that there's not a price tag for that. Like that kind of
mm,
stuff is what life's all about. The people aspect and interaction and affecting people like that. And I see him doing that to people that work under him. And he's had people that worked under him since they were 18, 19 that are going up the ladders. It's like the circle of career life. That
yeah,
kind of stuff is awesome.
yeah,
And anybody can do that. There's somebody out there that's 18, 25, 35 that doesn't have direction in life. And all it takes is one conversation, one act of kindness to really get them on the right direction and really influence and change their life. And I think sometimes as leaders, we take that for granted.
hmm,
Don't ever, don't ever take for granted an opportunity to influence somebody, because you never know what's going on in their life. You never know. You'd be that ambassador for change right there.
yeah. Well, man, I'm legitimately fired up, and I've got a sales call after this, so I'm ready to go do all
Listen,
those
you're going
things.
to close for sure.
Let's go, man. I appreciate your time, man, and I'll hit you up soon. And everybody else, thank you so much. I'll
John, I
see you around the
appreciate you.
bonfire. Yeah, man. Talk soon.
Talk to you soon.